Morning, everybody, and welcome. Hope everyone had a great long weekend. We're really excited to be here, albeit virtually. We of course wish we were all in person seeing you. My name is Skip Kelly. I'm a managing director here with JP Morgan. I work with key influencers across the venture and the executive levels within life science and healthcare. I'm joined by our expert panelists, Luba Greenwood and David Lucchino, who will introduce themselves a little bit later on. We're here to talk about some trends from the healthcare conference last week, as well as some other trends that we're seeing as we enter 2022. We'll talk for about 30 minutes with some questions that we prepared, and then we'll have a short Q&A session of 10 to 15 minutes. So please enter in any questions you have in the chat, and we'll do our best to get to them. First, certainly want to thank MassBio for putting this on. This is the 9th year of doing it. We had to skip last year, but we're excited to be back. JP Morgan specifically is excited to sponsor the MassBio Drive program, and my colleague Dan Graney has been really helpful with that as well. So we're excited there. So before I have David and Luba introduce themselves, given the title of the session, I do want to talk a little bit about the conference from JP Morgan's perspective. So hope you can bear with me there. Just a few stats from the conference. So there were 620 companies that presented, over 13,000 investor one-on-one meetings, and 10,000 folks that were registered to attend. As those that have been in the past, we have a mix of company presentations along with panels. This year, a lot of the topics focused on population health, health equity, D&I, fundraising, as well as value-based care. Some of the trends that came out of last week, certainly a lot of volatility in the markets, which I think we'll talk about every day, seem to have a different story. A lot of discussion around moving from a pandemic to an endemic and the trends that will hopefully follow there. A few bright spots that the innovation engines amongst our companies are really remaining robust, and there's a lot of optimism. And then with all this being said, balance sheets right now are very strong. There's a lot of M&A that presents itself hopefully for this year. And in general, healthcare management teams feel really strong and optimistic about the year. And so the last thing that I'll mention before passing on is around inflation. I'll be the first to admit I'm not an inflation expert, but I'd point you to the chairman of our investment strategy, Michael Semblist, from our private bank. He put out a really interesting report a couple of weeks ago entitled Reflation, and it goes really deep and really into the details. But I thought what I would highlight is some comments from our CEO, Jamie Dimon, who did a fireside chat with one of our expert analysts. A few things that he mentioned around inflation is that he doesn't feel that all inflation is transitory. Wages and the housing market could potentially have some legs there, but he does think the Fed is going to take the steps necessary to reduce inflation. Whether it gets to the 2% level that they're predicting, I think is one of his questions. But he ended his chat with some advice for those that are operating, all of you that are operating in this environment of inflation, is really just when you can find equity, when you can find debt, get it as fast as you can. Trying to time that perfectly is really, really challenging. And I'm sure it's a lot easier said than done, but that was just something that he left everybody with. So with that, thank you for bearing with me. I'd like to pass to David and Luba to introduce themselves. David, why don't you start, and if you don't mind, talk a little bit about your background, your involvement with MassBio, as well as maybe something that you're focused on this year in your company, whether it's hiring, D&I, fundraising, et cetera.
Yeah. Good morning. Thank you so much, Skip, and it's great to be here with Luba today. My name is David Lucchino. I am the CEO of Frequency Therapeutics. Frequency is about an 85-person company based out in Lexington, Massachusetts. We started with co-founders Bob Langer and Jeff Karp, and we're working on sort of creating shorthand is an organic way to regenerate your body using small molecules. And our first program is on hearing regeneration. We had some really compelling early data, and now we're in the process of having a phase 2 study that is 124 patients that we're going to really look to establish a real flag around being able to use small molecules to regenerate hearing. We have a second program in MS. I'm the immediate past chair of MassBio, And couldn't be more proud of the organization and what they've done. And I think when it came to this year's conference, we were focused as really looking at really two things: continuing to consistently tell our story to the right audiences. And JP Morgan and this conference does a great job every year to doing that and setting up the system that allows us to really connect. And then, we're all, as a CEO, you're always thinking about financing and what are your options? We're in a stable financial position. But I think, Skip, as you said, you always need to be aware and continue to understand what options are out there. The last comment I would make is, I think that, biotech, is hitting a natural sort of, there's an ebb and flow, but, there's a lot of money on the sidelines from big pharma to do transactions. You're still seeing, VC deals happen. There's crossover interest. So, I think staying the course and just continuing to run a consistent, stable, solid biotech business, oversimplified, but is my advice for so many out there who may be watching and of interest. On to my friend Luba.
Thank you. Thank you so much, David. I am Luba Greenwood. I've also been very lucky to have been working to, first of all, know David for some time and also have been working with him on the board, especially as he was the chair. And I'm on the board of MassBio, just as David and Skip had mentioned, truly a wonderful organization. I've been involved with MassBio for quite some time now, but I initially, can you hear me okay? I'm hearing a little bit of feedback, but you can hear okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, that's great. So I initially started out with MassBio as volunteering on different committees, and loved it so much and saw the value that it brought, both, I would say, to the biotechs, because I've been on the investor and biotech side, but also on the big pharma side when I was at Roche and Pfizer, and have to say, learned a lot from MassBio and other members as well. So very lucky, very happy to be on the board today, and also seeing how far MassBio has come over the years. What I'm doing today is I'm the CEO of Cogent Therapeutics. I'm also the managing partner and run the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute's fund. Cogent Therapeutics was actually one of our portfolio companies. As I would have to say, is running the fund for Dana-Farber, we see a lot of very exciting applications in cancer. We'll talk about this later today, that everybody calls themselves a platform technology or a new modality, especially when it comes to oncology. But it's in reality, it's a bit difficult to find. There are a lot of Me Too types of approaches. So one of the reasons I not just invested, but came on board to run Cogent is because we truly are differentiated. We're going after a very new technology called ferroptosis. It's a new way of killing. Well, it's not a new, it has been actually recently discovered way of killing cells, and how cells are die by themselves. And, there's also apoptosis, but really, ferroptosis is the new way, and we are not just inducing ferroptosis and cell death for diseases such as in oncology, but also in prevention as well of ferroptosis in areas such as cardiometabolic health as well as in neuro. So very excited to be a Cogent. We have a wonderful company. We have 20 wonderful scientists, and just we're in Cambridge and moving in the next month into a new space in the Seaport. One of the questions, Skip, that you've asked, what are we doing at JP Morgan? How do we approach it? And whether or not we're financing or something else. We're very lucky. We just had a financing. We raised 60 million Series A. So for us, it was very similar to David. We're out there not telling a story and also educating. I would say both the investors and the scientists and the scientific community, as well as the pharma and biotech companies out there, about what is ferroptosis and the importance of ferroptosis in disease and curing diseases. So it was a wonderful time to be there for that purpose, and also to see what's out there, who's doing what. So I would say that really is one of the things that we were doing, and happy to tell you how we prepared and what else we saw at JP Morgan.
No, that's great. That's a perfect segue. Thank you, Luba. So maybe we can start there, because it would have been interesting to have this conversation a couple of weeks ago ahead of JP Morgan to see how you're preparing just to provide advice. But being the second year in a row of it being virtual, Luba, why don't you talk a little bit about what you did that might be a little bit different? Maybe you learned some lessons from a couple years ago as well. I think that'd be helpful.
Absolutely, it's a great question, and it's something that we're also thinking for next year. What are we going to be doing for next year? Are we going to again assume that everything is in person? Is everybody going to be in person? I think this year we prepared for a hybrid model where some of our team members were going to be in participating from Boston, and some of us were going to be participating from San Francisco. And it wasn't easy to coordinate because you would have to be then in between Zoom meetings, different time zones, and then also in-person meeting. But we were able to prepare for that. So I would say for next year, as we ourselves are planning, and something that I would recommend is assuming that many, and we saw this even when we were speaking with pharma companies, most of them, even when they will be going in person next year, they'll be sending maybe a few people. They're not going to be sending again tens or sometimes 100 people over to San Francisco. They'll just be sending a few, and others will be participating over Zoom. So it's something that we definitely prepared for, and something that we'll be preparing for next year as well. And of course, how do you even manage the meeting? It's a little different, even for example, with introductions when you're in person. Sometimes in person you have 20 to 40-minute meetings. You start with introductions because you are there in person. So sometimes you have to figure out how much time do you want to take during the Zoom meeting for the introductions, given that it's not sometimes as effective as reading people's backgrounds. So we made sure that we, ahead of the meetings, have a briefing document on our team, as well as ourselves having a briefing document on everybody that we're preparing and meeting with, so that we have very productive meetings, especially if they're only 30, 40 minutes. David, what about you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think like so many, we start preparing for it in Q4. You know what's coming up. You want to spend your time well. We were probably a little bit more in on thinking we were going to go out there, a smaller contingency, but when that shifted, we've all learned how to adapt with Zoom and online. I think we had the level of meetings that we wanted to have, and without all the running around. I mean, there is an efficiency to it. I mean, I think I have to believe JP Morgan's going to consider some sort of in-person / hybrid type of model, as the conference evolves, as all conferences evolve going forward. And even when there's not a health concern with COVID or any other disease, it just seems to me to be a much more efficient way to do things, and particularly when, your meeting schedule gets really full.
Absolutely. But I'm not sure, David, if you've done that as well. We also expanded our meeting, so not to another week. So we're having JPM meetings for 3 weeks. Yeah. So we had them last week, and we still had them back to back. So it's I don't even know how that's possible, because we had just as many as we would have had in person 2 years ago, but then we're having a lot this week and next as well. And that gives you some time also to reflect and make sure that you prepare, and especially if there are certain questions that are asked, that you're prepared for the next one. So I think it's a great opportunity to just, David, as you said, perhaps this year we may continue to have this hybrid model, and extend meetings to the next week.
I think it's a great point. I just can't believe I didn't mention that, because you're so right. It's really extended. You're so right that, to a really a 3-week window. And that was really, I enjoyed it. And you're exactly right. It gives you a chance to, I think, see investors that you may not ever see and have really meaningful conversations without sort of feeling a bit, overwhelmed as you're trying to schedule 12 meetings in a day.
Absolutely. And it's also, again, just another thing to prepare. The world has changed a lot this year than 2 years ago, and I think this is especially probably relevant for our mass bio community, because and Skip, you probably have the stats, so I don't have the stats for it, but I know also mass bio does a great job of tracking this. Just the number of biotechs that we have had emerged and funded and started, and real biotechs, not, I mean, one person biotech is still a biotech, but with biotechs with big teams that have BD component. And there are a lot more. And so that means that there are a lot of people that are now joining, not just from the BD perspective, but from scientific perspective, biotechs that have never participated, even though they're 20, 30-year veterans in the pharma industry, they may not have been participating in JPM before, or at least to the same extent. So there's quite a bit of, I would say, education that is across, and I see this in our portfolio companies as well, that needs to be done in biotechs to prepare for the next JP Morgan, because not everybody has participated, and certainly not to the same extent, even 2-3 years ago. Oh, David, you're on mute.
Yeah, thanks. Agreed. Yeah, very good point. And I think, Lou, that points to the fact that there is a lot of money in big pharma, I believe, and on the sidelines from what I read. And there's a lot of companies that are really dealing with valuation issues. There's been a real shift over the last year of what's happened. I think most of us have experienced it, and so it'll be interesting to see. Pharma always wants to go with de-risked, which I understand, and but there could be some value-based shopping out there as well. I think as we think about a post JP Morgan sort of burst of activity, something I would anticipate.
Absolutely. And it's something that we certainly have seen right now with this JP Morgan is just the appetite of pharma companies right now for M&A, and not just acquisitions, but they know that things are cheap all of a sudden because there's been some correction in the market. Again, we're talking about public companies, not private companies, although, of course, whenever things happen in public markets, that affects your valuation as a private company as well, but not to the same extent. Comps are a little bit hard, a little bit more difficult. But it presents wonderful opportunities. Just like you said, David, pharma always wants something de-risked, but if they can't get something truly de-risked clinically, if it's cheap, they'll take it. Or if there's a discount, they'll take it, because I think I don't just think, when you look at pharma companies and what they say at both JP Morgan and also strategically, they're comfortable with the fact that 80% of their R&D is from external, either collaborations or co-development, partnerships, or in licensing, or just pure acquisitions. So there's no shame in it. We have amazing companies out here, including the mass bio community, and pharma companies are ready to partner.
Luba, when you were running, a lot of the external activities, I think it was at Roche.
Yep.
How would you approach JP Morgan? And sorry, Skip, but I was thinking about this. How would you approach JP Morgan as sort of the hunter as opposed to the hunted?
Yeah, so it's interesting as they prepare in Q4. We would start preparing already in Q3, and we would start with. And it's such a great question, David, because it's something that when you are on the biotech company side, sometimes I don't forget because I was on the other side, but sometimes people can forget that they're one of many, many companies that the pharma company is looking at. And you have to explain and know the pipeline so well, because you have to explain where do you fit. All of us biotech companies think that we're extraordinarily special. But at the end of the day, we have to be able to fit into the pipeline of the big pharma company that you're speaking with. And by the way, from the biotech perspective, you wouldn't want to have a co-development or partnership deal with somebody that is not a good fit for you. It never works out. I've seen those. Yeah, you might get the deal, but that deal would not be a good deal for you. So this is what pharma companies do, is they spend, starting at around Q2, they spend quite some time understanding what's in their pipeline, meeting with R&D colleagues to see are there any gaps, or, for example, a new direction strategically where they want to go. Then they identify a list, a prioritized list of assets they should be looking out for, both from the partnering and then also the M&A side. What was nice at Roche, for us, BD and M&A was together. So sometimes that's even easier to do. So that's another thing for a biotech company to understand. Are you speaking to M&A? Are you speaking to licensing? Are you speaking to external early innovation people? they're all different. They all have very different reasons why they go to JPM. So for us, we went to do big partnerships and big M&A, and it had to fit in within our strategic goals. And then we would, based on that work that we would do in Q2, Q3, then at this, I would say mid Q3 to the end of Q3, we then started reaching out to some of our favorites. And of course, this whole time, we would also be fielding in requests that were coming inbound as well.
Very helpful.
Maybe shifting to the public markets a little bit, David, one of the comments that you had during our prep session I thought was really interesting, on the heels of there are a lot of private companies right now that are preclinical companies, phase 1 companies, I should say, that accessed the public markets last year. And I thought you had some really good thoughts around what the future holds for them, some advice, and just your sentiments would be great.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, excuse me, there's I don't know how many public biotech companies there are. Skip, do you have any sense of that from your standpoint?
I think there's maybe 2,000, 2,500, something like that.
2,500, yeah.
2,500. And then, let's just assume a half or 3/4 are going to be somewhere in that, market cap range of, give or take, 500 million. So you're really in a show me story stage where you have to, put points on the board, build credibility with analysts, do what you say you're going to do. And, hope that, there's no technical hiccups, which there always are, but, hope there aren't any, and then hope you have the cash to your next sort of meaningful set of milestones. And not everyone's going to make it. I mean, there's a little bit, with that many public biotech companies, there's a little bit of a law of the jungle here. Who's going to be strong enough to survive? I anticipate there's going to be a push for some mergers of equals out there. I think there's going to be some companies that just unfortunately don't make it, and there will become some companies that rise above. In navigating all of that with such a big pool, you're going to have, pharma looking and, about where there are going to be opportunities for them in areas that they find attractive. And so I think that, everyone just needs to, who are running these types of companies and frequencies in that, in that category, spend your cash well, stay on strategy, continue to, as Luba said, educate people on what you're doing, never stop that. And make sure you're running a really effective clinical study, ode to the ClinOps team and the importance that they do to get it right the first time. So I think that's a little bit of what's going to happen with so many public biotechs. Is kind of my, is kind of how I see things shaking out.
Yeah, I agree, David. And just to add to that, so you're absolutely right. There are 2,500 companies, just for the number, as you said. The majority of them, actually 2,000 of them, are below 500 market cap. And out of those 2,000, I'm sure they all went on the market saying that they're platform technologies, and they aren't. For example, frequency, you're doing MS and you're doing hearing. That's a real platform. You're going after multiple areas that have high unmet medical need, and there's nothing else out there. It's not a me too. Yes, if you're out there, you're below 500 million in market cap, you're one of the 2,000, and you're not a real platform, and you're going after a me too, something, let's say in oncology. That is not it's going, there's a reality, and there's a market correction that is happening right now. And so I wouldn't be, as an investor, and we see as investors, they're not deterred by that. And of course, obviously, the acquirers and people that are interested in partnering are not deterred. So if you are a private company also raising, or even a public company thinking about going out there, if you're a real platform, you're truly going after diseases that matter and high medical need, and you're not a me too, you'll do really well. That has never changed, and that will not change given what's happening right now. There's just some of those companies are getting out of the circulation that probably should not have gone public.
Yeah, well said.
Okay. So what maybe pivoting a little bit to when we were talking about artificial intelligence and kind of drug discovery and how those are playing, into one another. It might be, obviously really relevant for our mass bio crowd as well. David, do you want to start with some thoughts around that?
I think it's fascinating, artificial intelligence, what it could mean to, I think I've been looking at it from a clinical trial design standpoint, for my just personal interest, but what it could mean for drug discovery. I still think there's, I think there are a lot of good steps forward, but from what I've seen, there's no one platform that's really taken, a definitive step forward and really changed the rules of the game. I think it's coming. I mean, you have a lot of sophisticated, and I'm fascinated by it, sort of software, modeling, coming into our, into our space, which I embrace. So, I mean, I think those are my high level comments. And I'm just sort of, we have some of those functions internally at my company, of course, but to see it in a definitive way, I'm really, anxious and excited that it will happen. I just don't, have a sense of when and who.
Yeah, just to add, David, as you said, you have those capabilities and internally, AI for me falls into two different, I would say, buckets. I think if you are a biotech company today, you probably should have some sort of a machine learning component that powers up your discovery. If you don't, may want to take a look at it because that is very helpful. Of course, we use it at Cogent Therapeutics. We don't even talk about it. Actually, our machine learning approach is to computation, and computational biology is you can have just a computational biology and AI company doing just that in therapeutic. But that's not enough. We have those capabilities and we have a very impressive team. But again, we are truly a biotech company at the end of the day, because what you see right now in AI, it's a tool for biotech to empower, first of all, discovery. And that's important. And that's what most biotech should be doing if they're not already. And then on the other side, there's also, just as David has mentioned, artificial intelligence, machine learning that is right now used to, for example, identify the right patient population or identify new biomarkers, maybe even digital biomarkers. And that's all great. But let's not kid ourselves. We still cannot figure, we can't use artificial intelligence, even though there are claims that are being made. But if you look at the data that we're using to do that, we can't do predictive yet modeling where we can figure out if our animal models translate into the actual, what we're doing in efficacy and safety in the human. We're trying to go that way, and I think that would be very exciting. But again, if you think about it, at the end of the day, who is generating the actual novel data and proprietary data that's enabling the key insights in artificial intelligence? It's the biotech and pharma companies.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Luba, I think I have a thought and something that you brought up that I wanted to follow up on, if that's okay, Skip. Shifting gears, 3 years ago, I don't think either you or I could have imagined that literally everyone in the world would know the name Moderna. Literally, it would have been beyond comprehension. And now here we are with, in our backyard, our sandbox that so many people are proud of, have this company that is truly global with a valuation that is unbelievable. And maybe what are your thoughts on the importance of sort of Moderna and, it's, and sort of, the Moderna effect and companies spinning off and people leaving and, and then a lot of people have been successful with the stock. I'd just be interested in getting your thoughts.
Well, thanks for putting me on the spot. I remember I was at Flagship, so I did think that Moderna is going to change the world even back then. But to be serious, it's a great question, and you remember about 2 years ago, and the conversation still is happening. Is 2-3 years ago, people started saying is biotech in a bubble? And my view has always been, and maybe because to me, it really matters whether or not we understand the biology of our diseases, whether or not we're truly going after the key diseases right now. And, or our approaches, if you think about it, on oncology right now, we're going after only about 5% of things where we know that there are genetic mutations. Outside of known genetic mutations, we don't have really anything. We have chemo and that's about it. So, and now we have Cogent, which is great. But still, we still don't know. If you're thinking about neuro and Alzheimer's, we just don't know the biology of many diseases. So when people would say to me, oh, well, there's a big bubble, I would say, well, actually there isn't. I think there's still a lot of science, a lot of medicine that we need to do. There's still untreated diseases out there. And for us, Moderna proved the case. We need great breakthroughs. And we actually see with great breakthroughs, things in technologies that we thought are something that you would never even have, and maybe not in this lifetime, or maybe it will be only useful for, and not to say the rare diseases are very important, of course, to go after them, but we didn't think that, okay, an exciting new technology can be used on such a large scale. I would say that it's a bit of it was a short-sighted view. So now we see that if you have a really exciting technology, if you can cure diseases, if you can come up with vaccines, you will be successful. And I think that investors are inspired by the story, and then people are inspired by the story, because if they're there, for example, at a big pharma company and they're now seeing where the innovation is coming from, which is the biotech companies, they want to be part of it. They want to be part of the action. So I'm happy that there's that recognition is finally coming.
One final point I'd make, and then let's skip sort of continue the path, is, during the height of the pandemic, it was fascinating to sort of think that MassBio and our friend Bob Coughlin, who was CEO then, was working so closely with Moderna, and at a point where it was really being viewed as sort of the sort of startup for the world. And the potential for, I'm getting a little bit on my soapbox here, of what we can do in Kendall Square never goes away. And not everyone's going to be a Moderna, but boy, there's going to be other companies that can have just as big of an impact. And that's what's so exciting about biotech. And to your point, continuing to have a deep commitment to understanding the biology of disease could really open this, open biotech up. And so people think we've hit some sort of artificial high. I think there's still a lot more headroom above us, because of the folks working and thinking about this and applying money in ways that to solve problems that no one thought could be solved. So with that, Skip,
it's great.
Turn it back to you, Skip.
No, I love it. Well, just remind everybody. So we've received a couple of questions kind of that have come in, but feel free to put those in the chat box and we'll get to them. But maybe before we answer a few of those, we have just a few, about 13, 15 minutes left. David and Luba, would you provide just some advice? I mean, as a founder, I know you've raised money countless times. There's the saying, you're always raising money as a founder. But I think for our crew here, it'd be great just for any advice that you have for those that are raising money. And David, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I spent some time working at Polaris Ventures and got to know one of their partners well over there. And they, the saying he taught me was, when you want money, ask for advice. And when you want advice, ask for money. And, it sounds silly, but it's all about how you approach it in someone's perception of scarcity. And so if you have on the earlier stages, if you have a really exciting idea and you send your business plan into one of the VCs, it's going to probably get put on a stack. And Luba could talk about this. She spent some time at Flagship as well. But if you meet a partner and you say, hey, listen, I got this great idea. I'm not sure I want to raise money, but I'd love to get your advice. Can we grab a cup of coffee or do a Zoom? I bet you'll get a much more immediate and likely favorable response. And so that coupled with, you just never stop worrying about money, because the money that you have gives you options. And when you're running these biotech companies, your best friend is having good options on where to sort of take your business.
Yeah, I agree. And also to add, I would say that understanding very clearly yourself, even if you are the founder and the scientific founder, but understanding, and sometimes, again, probably more so at Dana-Farber, we see really great basic research being done. Not all of it is translational. And things that are really, truly translational and transformative are very exciting, but you have to put that in your own head, first of all. Why is it important? Why is this innovation so important? Is this something that is going to transform all of research, transform a patient's life? Is this going to, what is this going to do? And why is this different from what is out there today? So first of all, you have to understand it yourself. And not just understand it, but believe it, and know that that's in, and do the research and show the facts and show the data that in fact is true. And then you also want to make sure that you communicate and articulate that very clearly to the investors that you're meeting with. And then also understanding what is it that you want to be spending the money on. Sometimes that is an afterthought. And the first fundraising, you have a pretty clear, especially if you're doing a seed, you have a pretty clear understanding of how do you want to de-risk, let's say, one of your programs and take it further. But sometimes after A's and B's, there's not as much thinking through exactly what it is that you need the money for and what is the spend for. So I would say, again, the clarity of thought, proper communication to investors, and then also thinking, just as I mentioned with partnering, investment, it's the same. You want to make sure you have the right investors, and just if and there's so many funds today that weren't even around 2-3 years ago, that some of them are great investors for certain biotechs and some of them are not. So also be careful about who is giving you money, and ask whether or not you want that, because they are just as David said, when they give you money, are they also giving you the advice? And you want that advice, you want that guidance and advice, and a partner as well, as you grow in your board.
Well said.
Great. Well, we'll shift to some of the questions that are coming from all of you. Maybe the first one, and I'll just toss it up, Luba or David, you guys can jump at it. But what is the outlook on gene therapy and genetic medicine in the next year or two?
Luba, you're seeing a lot of that at Dana-Farber. Why don't you kick off?
Yeah, that's what everybody's talking about. So I would say for the next year or two, I'm glad that it was an easy question, because it's a short term. I don't know. The answer is for the long term. I am worried that if we don't see enough validation clinically, or if there are potentially some safety issues, that will no longer be the case in 2-3 years. But in the short term, that's a hot field. Everybody is excited. That's what people are looking for. Again, I think it was Bob Nelson has recently tweeted that somebody's actually put together the answer to your question out there. I think it was one of the banks that talked about what are some of the hot fields, and to that he said, and I agree with it, which is it doesn't, at the end of the day, what matters is not the modality. What matters is the science and the strength of your science and the importance of that to patients and how quickly you can get that to patients. So yes, the answer is short term, yes, but that's not important. David, I don't know if you have.
Yeah, I think those are all great points. And I would also say there are going to be hiccups. There are going to be things that don't work as well as others. And I think people just need to accept that. It's not going to be a cure-all or one size fits all. I think you're seeing some progress like in sickle cell, but there are other areas where you're not seeing progress. But you have a lot of, Editas now has been around for a number of years. It's had a corporate partnership, and these are hard. Biology is a fickle friend, and so I want the best for it, because I want everyone to be healthy. But I do think that there's going to be an ebb and flow, and even I look at Beam Therapeutics, and there's no question as a CEO I have Beam envy. I mean, those guys raise all the money they want. They get great corporate partnerships. They're great people, and and I think hope springs eternal, and that's the beauty of our industry. But they have yet to get into clinic, and and I want them to do well. But that's really where for all of these the rubber hits the road. So people just need to be patient and understand it's not going to solve everything on day one.
And staying on cell and gene therapy, any thoughts around M&A for this year in that specific space? One of the other questions that just came in alongside of that, if there are any thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, again, there is going to be, I would say, an interest in partnerships in terms of the actual acquisitions. It really depends on many large pharma companies have already partnered or acquired capabilities in that space. So they're going, and those capabilities for an acquisition purposes are very expensive. So they're going to be much more targeted. So really, I guess the answer, don't mean to be a lawyer about it, but it depends.
Yeah. I would say that what we do at Frequency is trying to, be a new mode of regenerative medicine along these lines by using small molecules to activate the body's inner, regenerative potential and heal right within the body. So I view it almost as sort of, as close to organic, if it continues to play out as you can get. I think, cell therapies always struggled with, a lot of the complexities around removing cells, manipulating them and putting them back. And then gene therapy and trying to really figure out the right way to deliver and really have that tracking system that could get the vector where it needs to be. I know I look at this area from any hearing space, which I operate in, and there's some really difficult challenges that they have, and you have great scientists working on them. But again, it's challenging. So I think anybody that can make consistent scientific breakthroughs, maybe the kinds that aren't going to grab headlines, but the kinds that really make a difference at moving the science ahead, will probably be an attractive target.
Okay. Well, we probably have time for one more question, and then we can wrap. We haven't talked a ton about COVID or the pandemic, and one of the questions here is around what are some of the emerging risks that you've noticed in the biotech world specifically since the beginning of COVID? Anything come to mind?
I would say workforce. I think, everybody, I think there's an expectation now of people want to work from home. We spend all this money on facilities, and obviously if you're a scientist, you got it, we need you to come in. But I think, people want a lot more flexibility. And I think if we don't give them that flexibility, or various companies don't embrace that, I think they're going to use their feet to show their displeasure. And so that's something that we're working with. And I think it's going to change the model of how much space do I really need? Certainly on the office side, can I do much more of a hoteling type of scenario and really, expand the labs even more, or just take less space overall?
Yeah, I completely agree. And what's been wonderful is to see that many the scientists, it's good to see that they still want to go into the labs. That's a good thing. You're right, David, outside of many of the scientists that are want to be in the lab, yeah, there a lot of people want to work from home, or they want to work remotely, or for example, they would like to work from other states and maybe come into Boston, once a week or something, or once every other week. And I have to say, from an investor perspective, it could be a positive sometimes, because you have access to more workforce and you're thinking there are many more people. I would say from a CEO perspective, it's a bit different, because you have to build culture and a lot of the science that it's something that can only happen faster and better if you do collaborate. But you want to make sure you provide a collaborative environment where people want to collaborate and come to work versus requiring people. So there is that balance. I can tell you for us what we're looking, because we are also moving to an exciting new space at the seaport, is thinking and working with actual scientists and see when do they want to come in, and some days for collaboration, for example, once a week or twice a week, where everybody's there, again, not for FaceTime purposes, but really for ways to collaborate and think about, again, I wouldn't even say meetings, but just knowing that that's when people are there. So if you had any questions or ideas, or want to have a guest, for example, come in and a speaker come in, those are some of the days that you can have people over. So I think it opens up an opportunity for creativity, but it's certainly not without its challenges.
Okay. Well, we're pretty much out of time. I don't know if either one of you had any final quick thoughts, and then we can wrap.
I think, weather the storm. Biotech's always going to have the ebbs and flows. I don't think there's any fundamental gotcha that I can see. And so I think this is just part of the natural process of where we are right now.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree, and I have to say I'm excited to be part of Mass Bio in this community. It just keeps on and it's and we all learn from each other. That's another thing, is continuing to be a real community and learn from each other. It's you know, nobody is an expert in this. It changes all the time, no matter how many years you've been in biotech or pharma. So it's a pleasure, really pleasure being here, and I look forward to 2022.
Well said.
Perfect. Well, thank you again to MassBio for putting this on. David and Luba, you guys have a great chemistry with each other. So thank you for making my job easy, and for all of you for joining. Appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
Luba's the best. Thank you.
You too.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.